The Habits and Self-Discipline for Success Blueprint. Build unbreakable habits, master self-discipline, and rewire your mindset for lasting productivity, motivation, and personal development by Marcus Hale. Introduction. If you could fly high above the frozen world of Antarctica in the year 1911, you would see two tiny lines of black dots moving across the endless white snow. From that height, the dots look like two lines of ants. Both lines are heading toward the same spot, the South Pole. No human had ever stood there before. It was the most dangerous race on Earth. If you watched for a few weeks, you would notice something strange about how these two lines moved. The first line, led by a man named Robert Falcon Scott, moved in fits and starts. On days when the sun was out and the wind was calm, the dots moved very fast. They pushed themselves until they were exhausted. They wanted to make up for lost time. But when the sky turned gray and the snow began to blow, the dots stopped. They stayed in their tents for days, waiting for the weather to get better. They waited to feel like moving again. The second line was led by Roald Amundsen. His dots moved differently. Every single day, they moved about 15 to 20 miles. It didn't matter if the sun was shining or if a blizzard was howling. On the days when the team felt strong and the weather was perfect, Amundsen made them stop after 20 miles, even if they wanted to go further. He wanted them to save their energy. On the days when the wind was so cold it felt like needles on their skin, he made them keep going until they hit their mark. One team reached the pole first, stayed healthy, and made it back alive. The other team arrived weeks later, only to find Amundsen's flag already waving in the wind. That second team never made it home. They ran out of food and energy in the middle of a storm. The difference between living and dying on that ice wasn't about who was braver. It wasn't about who had better luck. It was about a simple rule that Amundsen lived by, the 20-mile march. He didn't rely on how he felt. He relied on a system. The gap between who you are and who you could be. Most of us live our lives like the first team. We are fragmented high achievers. We have big goals, we have a lot of talent, but our progress looks like a jagged line on a graph. One week, we are on fire. We go to the gym every morning, we eat salads, and we finish all our work early. We feel like we finally figured it out. We are motivated. But then something happens. Maybe we have a bad day at the office. Maybe the weather gets cold or we don't sleep well one night. Suddenly, the heroic spurt ends. We stop going to the gym. We order pizza because we deserve it after a long day. We push our big projects to the last minute and then stay up until 3:00 a.m. in a panic to finish them. This leads to total burnout. We spend the next few days feeling like a shell of a person, guilty and tired, waiting for the next burst of motivation to save us. This is the procrastination loop. It's a cycle of guilt, rushing, and exhaustion. It makes you feel like you are running as fast as you can just to stay in the same place. You know what you should be doing, but you can't make yourself do it. You feel like a slave to your moods. If you feel good, you work. If you feel bad, you hide. The truth is that you don't have a talent problem. You have a discipline problem. And most people think discipline is something you are either born with or you are. They think it's about willpower, a magical tank of fuel that some people have and others don't. But willpower is a trick. It's like a battery that runs out right when you need it most. True success isn't about having more willpower. It's about building a mind that doesn't need it. It's about moving from being a person who reacts to the world to being an integrated architect of action. The blueprint for a new mind, this book, is not a collection of hustle culture slogans. You won't find advice here to just want it more or grind until you drop. That kind of thinking is what causes the burnout in the first place. Instead, we are going to look at the blueprint. A blueprint is a plan for a building. It shows you where the foundation goes, where the walls stand, and how the roof stays up. Discipline is exactly the same. It is a structure you build in your mind. We are going to use evidence from history and science to show you how to build that structure. We will look at how the brain actually works, a concept called neuroplasticity. You will see that your brain is like a muscle. Every time you follow through on a small habit, you are physically changing the wiring in your head. You are making it easier for the disciplined you to take the wheel and harder for the lazy you to grab the controls. We will learn from people who had to be disciplined just to stay alive. We will look at Viktor Frankl, a man who survived the worst places a human can be sent. He discovered that even when everything is taken away from you, you still have one choice left: how you respond to what is happening. This is the internal citadel, a fortress in your mind that no one can break into unless you let them. We will also look at Benjamin Franklin, who was once a messy, disorganized young man. He wasn't born a genius who had everything together. He had to create a system of 13 virtues and track them every day to turn himself into the person we read about in history books. By the end of this book, you will be able to act based on your goals instead of your moods. Stay focused on deep, important work for hours without checking your phone. Build habits that feel automatic, like brushing your teeth. Stay calm and productive even when your life gets messy or stressful. Stop the cycle of burning out and starting over. The view from Capitol Hill to see what this looked like in real life, let's look at a woman named Maya Chen. It is a rainy Tuesday night in Seattle. Maya is 34 years old. She lives in a small apartment in Capitol Hill that is filled with half-read books about productivity and expensive planners she only used for a week. Her cat, Pixel, is meowing for food, but Maya barely hears him. Maya is a senior account manager at a fast-paced digital marketing agency. Everyone thinks she is a superstar. She is creative, she is fast, and she always gets the job done. But Maya has a secret. She is miserable. Her day started at 8:00 a.m., but she didn't actually start working until 4:00 p.m. She spent the whole morning in productive procrastination. She cleaned her kitchen. She organized her color-coded emails. She went to the grocery store to buy healthy snacks. She did everything except the one thing she actually needed to do: create a strategy deck for her biggest client. Now it's 9:00 p.m. Maya is staring at a blinking cursor on her laptop. Her heart is pounding. She is on her third cup of coffee and her desk is covered in empty cans. She knows she will be awake until at least 2:00 a.m. She will finish the project and it will be good, but she will pay for it tomorrow. She will be too tired to go to the gym. She will be grumpy with her coworkers. She will feel like a fraud. Maya believes this is just her process. She tells herself, I'm just not a morning person, or I need the pressure of a deadline to be creative. She thinks she is a fragmented high achiever. She has all the potential in the world, but she is scattered and reactive. She is her own worst enemy. She wants to be a person who is calm and in control, but she doesn't know how to bridge the gap between who she is and who she wants to be. She is waiting for a spark of motivation that never seems to last. Maya is about to learn that she doesn't need a spark. She needs a system. The journey ahead in the pages that follow, we are going to walk through the steps to help Maya and you build that system. We will start with the 3 pillars of the disciplined mind. We'll see how Benjamin Franklin used a simple grid to change his character and how you can use a focus filter to choose the one habit that will make everything else easier. Next, we will look at self-sabotage. We will find out why your brain actually wants you to stay on the couch and how to use the 10-minute rule to beat your primitive brain at its own game. We will talk about environment design. You'll see how to make your home and your phone work for you instead of against you. You will learn the Ulysses contract, a way to lock yourself into a good decision before you have the chance to change your mind. We will dive into the 20-mile march. You will learn how to set upper and lower bounds so you never burn out again. We will see how consistency beats intensity every single time. We will explore identity. You'll learn why saying, I am not a person who eats sugar, is much more powerful than saying, I am trying to avoid sugar. We will see how Florence Nightingale changed her entire life by changing how she saw herself. Finally, we will look at resilience. We will learn from Admiral James Stockdale, who survived years as a prisoner of war by using something called the Stockdale paradox. You will learn how to keep your discipline even when your world is falling apart. This book is your manual for building an unbreakable life. It is the guide for moving from I wish I could to this is who I am. Maya's story is just beginning. She doesn't know it yet, but the girl staring at the blinking cursor in the dark apartment is about to become a person of unshakable focus. She is about to find her own 20-mile march. It is time to stop waiting for the weather to clear. It is time to start walking. Let's begin. Chapter 1: 3 Pillars of the Discipline. In 1723, a 17-year-old boy stepped off a boat in Philadelphia. He was dirty, his pockets were stuffed with extra shirts and stockings, and he was nearly broke. He had run away from his family in Boston. He had no friends in this new city and no place to sleep. He walked down the street with 3 large, puffy rolls of bread. He ate one, gave the other 2 to a woman and her child, and kept walking. That boy was Benjamin Franklin. Most people today think of him as a wise old man on a $100 bill. They think of him as a genius who flew kites in lightning storms or a great leader who helped start a country. We imagine him as someone who was born with a perfect brain and a heart of steel. We assume he was just naturally disciplined. But the young man who arrived in Philadelphia was a mess. He was smart, but he was also rude and liked to argue with everyone. He was disorganized. He had a hard time keeping his mouth shut when he should have been listening. He had big dreams, but he didn't have the habits to reach them. He was a leather apron printer, a hard-working guy who lived in a world of ink and heavy paper, but he knew he was his own worst enemy. He realized that having a good brain was like having a fast horse. If you don't have a saddle or a way to guide the horse, it will just run into a tree. Franklin decided he needed to build a saddle for his mind. The invention of the habit tracker by the time he was 20 years old, Franklin was tired of being a fragmented high achiever. He knew he was capable of doing great things, but he was inconsistent. He would work very hard for 3 days and then spend 3 days wasting time. He would promise himself he would be nicer to people, and then he would get into a fight an hour later. He decided to try something that no one else was doing at the time. He didn't just make a New Year's resolution. He knew those didn't work. Instead, he looked at his life like a scientist looking at a bug. He identified 13 things he wanted to improve. He called them his 13 virtues. They included things like temperance, don't eat or drink too much; silence, speak only when it helps others or yourself; order, let all your things have their places; industry, lose no time, always be doing something useful; frugality, don't waste money. Franklin was smart enough to know he couldn't fix all 13 at once. If he tried to be perfect in every way starting Monday morning, he would fail by Monday afternoon. This is where most of us get stuck. We want to change everything today. We want to lose 20 pounds, write a book, and learn a new language all in the same week. Franklin did something different. He created a small book. On each page, he drew a grid with 7 columns for the days of the week. Then he made 13 rows for his virtues. He decided to focus on only one virtue each week. During that week, he would try his hardest to be perfect at that one thing. If he failed at any of the other 12, he didn't beat himself up. He just focused on the lead virtue for that week. But every evening, he would look at his chart. If he failed at any virtue during the day, he would put a little black spot in the box for that day. His goal was to keep the row for his virtue of the week clear of black spots. After a week, he would move to the next virtue. This meant that every 13 weeks, he would go through the whole list. He did this 4 times a year. At first, his book was full of black spots. He was shocked to see how often he failed. He realized he was much messier than he thought he was. But as the weeks turned into months, the spots started to disappear. He wasn't becoming perfect, but he was becoming disciplined. He was training his brain to pay attention. The 3 pillars, clarity, consistency, and consequence. Franklin's success wasn't magic. It was built on 3 pillars that anyone can use. If you feel like you are struggling to get things done, it is usually because one of these pillars is missing. The first pillar is clarity. Franklin didn't just say, "I want to be a better person." That is too blurry. He said, "I will not speak unless it helps someone." That is clear. You can measure that. Most of us fail because our goals are like fog. We say we want to be productive or get healthy. But your brain doesn't know what to do with get healthy. It knows what to do with walk for 20 minutes. The second pillar is consistency. This is the 20-mile march we talked about earlier. Franklin didn't try to be a saint for one day and then give up. He did his little chart every single night for years. He knew that doing a little bit every day was better than doing a lot once in a while. Discipline is not a giant leap. It is a long walk made of small steps. The third pillar is consequence. This doesn't mean a punishment. It means feedback. Franklin's black spots were his feedback. When he saw a spot on his paper, it was a reminder that he had drifted off course. Without a way to track what you are doing, it is easy to lie to yourself. We all think we are working harder than we actually are. The chart tells the truth. Maya's Sunday morning overhaul. In a cluttered apartment in Seattle, Maya Chen was sitting at her kitchen table. It was Sunday morning, and the sun was barely peeking through the clouds. Maya was a fragmented high achiever, just like young Ben Franklin. She had a great job at a marketing agency, but she felt like she was constantly drowning. She had spent the last 3 nights staying up until 2:00 a.m. to finish projects she had put off all week. Her head ached and her cat Pixel was meowing for food she had forgotten to buy. Maya was tired of the heroic spurt. She was tired of the panic. She decided this was the day everything would change. She went to a fancy bookstore and bought a $40 planner. It had a leather cover and gold-edged pages. She sat down with a cup of coffee and started writing. "Tomorrow," she wrote, "I will wake up at 5:00 a.m. I will meditate for 30 minutes. I will go for a 5-mile run. I will eat only vegetables. I will clear my email inbox to 0. I will read 50 pages of a business book. I will not look at my phone after 7:00 p.m. She wrote down 15 new habits. She felt a rush of excitement. This is called manic optimism. It's the feeling we get when we imagine a new version of ourselves. It feels like we have already done the work just because we wrote it down. But then, Maya looked at a copy of the Discipline Blueprint she had started reading. She saw the story of Franklin's 13 virtues. She saw how he only focused on one thing at a time. She looked back at her list of 15 habits and felt a weight in her stomach. She realized that if she tried to do all 15 tomorrow, she would probably sleep through her 5:00 a.m. alarm. Then she would feel like a failure, give up on the run, eat a donut for breakfast, and spend the rest of the day feeling guilty. Maya took a deep breath. She picked up a red pen and crossed out 13 of the habits. She decided to focus on only 2 lead dominoes. Wake up at 7:00 a.m. Not 5:00 a.m., which was too big of a jump. Deep work for 1 hour. 1 hour of focused work before checking any email. She put the $40 planner aside and grabbed a simple piece of paper. She drew a grid, just like Franklin. She felt a sense of relief. She wasn't trying to be a superhero anymore. She was just trying to be a person who could do 2 simple things consistently. She was choosing the 20-mile march over the 100-mile sprint. The Seinfeld strategy. Don't break the chain. Long after Franklin, a young comedian named Jerry Seinfeld used a similar trick to become one of the most successful performers in the world. When Seinfeld was starting out, he wasn't the funniest guy in the room. But he knew that to be a great comic, he had to write better jokes. To write better jokes, he had to write every day. He didn't wait for inspiration to strike. He didn't wait until he felt funny. He bought a giant wall calendar that showed the whole year on one page. He hung it on his wall. Then he got a big red marker. Every day that he sat down and wrote jokes, he would put a big red X over that day on the calendar. "After a few days, you'll have a chain," Seinfeld said. "You'll like seeing that chain, especially when you get a few weeks under your belt. Your only job is to not break the chain." Seinfeld wasn't worried about how good the jokes were that day. He wasn't worried about whether he would ever be famous. He only cared about the red X. This is the power of the second pillar: consistency. When you focus on the chain, you stop worrying about the giant mountain you have to climb. You just worry about today's link. If you can make today's link, you have won. This takes the pressure off your brain. It stops the all-or-nothing thinking that kills discipline. If Maya wakes up at 7:00 a.m., she gets to mark her X. It doesn't matter if she feels tired or if the weather is bad. The X is the goal. Admiral McRaven's bed, the third pillar, consequence, is often about the small wins that prove you are in control of your life. In 2014, Admiral William H. McRaven gave a famous speech to a group of college students. He had been a Navy SEAL for 36 years. He had been through some of the hardest training in the world. He told the students that if they wanted to change the world, they should start by making their bed. This sounds silly. How does tucking in your sheets help you become a disciplined leader? McRaven explained that making your bed is the first task of the day. It is a small, simple task that requires a tiny bit of discipline. But once it is done, you have completed your first mission. It gives you a small sense of pride. That small win gives you the energy to do the next task and the next. By the end of the day, that one completed task has turned into many completed tasks. And if you have a terrible day, you come home to a bed that is made by you. It is a physical sign that you still have power over your environment. It is a consequence of your discipline that you can see and feel. For Franklin, it was the black spot. For Seinfeld, it was the red X. For McRaven, it was the smooth sheets. These are all the Habit Tracker 1. They are simple, physical ways to prove to yourself that you are doing what you said you would do. The focus filter. Finding your lead domino. The biggest mistake people make with self-discipline is trying to fix their whole life at once. They want to be a different person by Monday morning. But discipline is a muscle. If you have never lifted weights, you don't walk into the gym and try to lift 500 pounds. You would hurt yourself and never go back. You have to use what I call the focus filter. Imagine your life is a row of dominoes. Some dominoes are small and some are huge. If you try to knock over the huge ones first, nothing happens. But if you find the lead domino, the one thing that, if you knock it over, makes everything else easier, then the whole row starts to fall. For Benjamin Franklin, the lead domino was temperance. He believed that if he could control what he ate and drank, his head would be clearer and his body would have more energy. That would make it easier to be industrious and silent. For Maya, the lead domino was waking up at 7:00 a.m. If she woke up on time, she didn't start her day in a panic. If she wasn't in a panic, she didn't feel the need to procrastinate. What is your lead domino? It is usually the habit you have been avoiding. It's the one that feels a little bit uncomfortable, but you know would change everything. Maybe it's drinking a glass of water before your coffee. Maybe it's putting your phone in another room at 9:00 p.m. Maybe it's writing down your 3 most important tasks for the next day before you go to sleep. The focus filter asks you to ignore the other 99 things you should do and protect this one habit with your life. The clumsy phase when you start using a habit tracker or focusing on a lead domino, something annoying will happen. It will feel fake. It will feel clumsy. When Franklin first started his book, he felt silly. He was a grown man carrying around a little notebook with circles and spots. He felt like a failure because there were so many spots, but he kept going. He realized that the clumsy phase is just your brain rewiring itself. We will talk more about this in the chapter on neuroplasticity, but for now, you just need to know that feeling bad at a new habit is a sign that it is working. If it were easy, you wouldn't need discipline. Discipline is the ability to do the thing when it feels boring or hard or stupid. Maya felt this on her first Monday morning. Her alarm went off at 7:00 a.m. Her bed was warm and Seattle was gray and rainy outside. Her brain started making excuses. You stayed up late on Sunday, her brain whispered. You can start on Tuesday. 1 more hour won't hurt. This is the moment where the integrated architect of action is born. Maya didn't listen to the whisper. She didn't think about her whole life. She didn't think about her client strategy or her messy desk. She only thought about the X. She got out of bed, walked to the kitchen, and checked the box on her piece of paper. She had won the first battle of the day. Your first tool, the manual feedback loop. We live in a world of apps and digital notifications. We have watches that tell us to stand up and phones that track our steps. But there is a secret power in doing things the old way. Franklin used a paper book. Seinfeld used a wall calendar. There is a connection between your hand and your brain when you physically mark a box. When you use an app, it's easy to ignore the notification. You can just swipe it away. But when a piece of paper is sitting on your desk or taped to your bathroom mirror, it stares at you. It asks you, did you do the work? This is a manual feedback loop. It forces you to stop and think for 5 seconds every day. The morning plan, spend 2 minutes looking at your lead domino. Remind yourself why it matters. The evening review, spend 2 minutes looking at your chart. Mark your X or your spot. This is the foundation of the disciplined mind. You are building clarity, the habit, consistency, the daily mark, and consequence, the visual record. Benjamin Franklin lived to be 84 years old. He became one of the most famous men in the world. He helped draft the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. He discovered secrets of electricity. He spoke multiple languages. In his autobiography, written when he was an old man, he looked back at his little book of virtues. He said that he never reached perfection. He never got rid of all the black spots. But he said that he was a much better and happier man for having tried. He didn't succeed because he was a genius. He succeeded because he was a man with a chart who refused to give up on himself. One step for today. You don't need a $40 planner, and you don't need to change 13 things about your life. You just need a piece of paper and a pen. Today's action: pick one lead domino habit. It must be something you can do in less than 15 minutes. Draw a simple grid for the next 7 days on a piece of paper. Tape that paper to your wall or put it on your nightstand. Tonight, before you go to sleep, look at that paper. If you did your habit, give yourself a big, bold mark. If you didn't, leave it blank. Don't judge yourself. Just look at the paper. Tomorrow, your only goal is to make sure there is a mark on that paper. Don't break the chain. Chapter 2: Why do we sabotage our own suck? The wind in Poland during the winter of 1944 did more than bite. It searched for any weakness in a person's spirit. Viktor Frankl stood in the frozen mud of a concentration camp, his body thin as a rail and his stomach echoing with hunger. He had lost his family, his career as a famous doctor, and even the manuscript of the book he had spent years writing. All he had left was a ragged piece of cloth and the numbers tattooed on his arm. On one particularly brutal morning, Frankel watched a fellow prisoner, a man who had been a strong, steady worker, simply refuse to get out of his bunk. The man didn't move. He didn't cry. He just stared at the ceiling. In the camps, this was a known sign of the end. When a man lost his why, his body followed shortly after. Frankel realized that if he didn't find a way to protect his own mind, he would be next. He was inches away from letting the darkness take him. In that moment of total despair, a strange thing happened. Frankel began to imagine himself standing on a stage in a warm, well-lit lecture hall. He saw himself wearing a clean suit and speaking to a crowd of interested students. He was teaching them about the very pain he was feeling right then. By turning his suffering into a lesson, he found a way to distance himself from it. He realized that while the guards could take his clothes, his food, and his freedom, they could not touch the small space inside his head where he decided what things meant. This realization saved his life. He survived the camp not because he was the strongest or the luckiest, but because he built a fortress inside his mind. He discovered that between the terrible things happening to him and his reaction to them, there was a tiny gap. In that gap lived his power to choose. If he could control that gap, he could control his life, even in the middle of a nightmare. The architecture of the internal citadel, we often think of self-discipline as a battle of will, like a soldier forcing himself to march. But Viktor Frankl's discovery suggests something different. True discipline is about building what we call the internal citadel. A citadel is a strong fortress that sits on high ground, protecting a city. In your mind, the citadel is the place where your true self lives, safe from the storms of your moods, your cravings, and the chaos of the world. The internal citadel has three main parts that work together to keep you on track. The stimulus. This is anything that happens to you. It could be a mean email from a boss, a rainy day that makes you want to stay in bed, or the smell of a fresh pizza when you are trying to eat better. The space. This is the gap Frankl discovered. It is the split second after the stimulus happens, but before you react. Most people don't know this space exists. They just react like a light switch being flipped. The response, this is what you actually do. It is the action you take after the stimulus. Most of us spend our lives being pushed by the stimulus. If we feel tired, we quit. If we feel annoyed, we snap. We are like a boat with no rudder, tossed around by every wave. Building the internal citadel means widening that space so you can choose a response that fits your goals, not just your current mood. When you understand that the space exists, you stop being a slave to your feelings. You realize that feeling, like quitting, is just a piece of data. It's like a weather report saying it might rain. You can acknowledge the report without letting it cancel your plans. The citadel gives you the walls you need to stay dry while the storm passes. The saboteur in the basement. Even with a fortress, we often find ourselves opening the gates for the enemy. We know we should work on that big project, but we find ourselves scrolling through social media instead. We know we should go for a run, but we stay on the couch. This is called self-sabotage, and it happens because of a very old part of your brain called the amygdala. Think of the amygdala as a tiny, fearful guard living in the basement of your brain. Its only job is to keep you safe and comfortable. Thousands of years ago, this was great. It kept our ancestors away from tigers and poisonous berries. But today, the amygdala can't tell the difference between a tiger and a difficult task. To your lizard brain, writing a hard report feels like a threat because it's stressful and uncertain. When you face a challenge, the amygdala screams, "Danger, go back to the couch. There are snacks and blankets there." This is what author Stephen Pressfield calls the resistance. It is a force that pushes against any work that helps us grow. The resistance loves the status quo. It hates change. It uses your own voice to talk you out of your dreams, telling you that you're too tired, that you'll start tomorrow, or that you aren't good enough anyway. Understanding that this voice is just a biological safety alarm is the first step to ignoring it. It isn't the truth. It's just your brain trying to save energy. When you feel that heavy, sinking feeling of procrastination, that is the amygdala trying to hijack your citadel. Maya's Thursday night battle. Maya Chen sat on her velvet couch in her Seattle apartment, staring at her phone. It was 8:30 p.m. on a Thursday. Her workday had been a disaster. A client had moved a deadline up by 3 days, and her cat, Pixel, had knocked a glass of water onto her keyboard. She was exhausted, grumpy, and her brain felt like it was made of cotton candy. She had planned to go to the gym for 20 minutes and then spend an hour reading a book on marketing strategy. But as she sat there, the resistance started whispering. You had such a hard day, the voice said. You deserve a break. Why not just order that large pepperoni pizza and watch 4 episodes of that baking show?